Romulus, founder of Rome, the year is 753 BCE. For the past 265 years, Rome has been ruled by kings of the Etruscan nobility. The last 5 have all been men named Tarquinius, which means it's about time for a new dynasty. But only because a she-wolf happened to be trotting by, saw what happened, and immediately decided to adopt these kids as her own. She took them back to her den, suckled them as her own, and raised them as princesses. Probably also teaching them how to hunt and fight and stuff, because she was a wolf, and that's what wolves do. But Remus thought that was lame and wanted to build the city at the top of the nearby Aventine Hill instead. Now this is a tricky date because it's based entirely on legend. We don't have any contemporary evidence of Romulus, but historians believe that Rome was founded sometime during this period of transition between the Etruscan kings and the Roman Republic. But it seemed like everything was going well for Rome, so well, in fact, that Romulus started having feelings, like really strong feelings. Legend says that one day a terrible storm came to Rome. Lightning cracked, thunder boomed, the winds howled, and when it was over, Romulus was gone. Some say he climbed up the steps of the Temple of Apollo, reached godhood, and joined the Olympians. Like, no trace of him remained. Others say the gods carried him away in a chariot of fire, and still others say he got abducted by the goddess of the underworld. But everyone agrees that Romulus was taken away, and Rome was left without a king. That would have been the perfect time for someone to write down the legends of Rome SRE kings, including the story of Romulus and Remus. He was trained in the art of kingship by none other than the goddess of wisdom, Minerva, and he ruled with wisdom and fairness, making him beloved by the people of Rome. In fact, he was so good at being king, the Romans considered him a mythical ideal ruler, a perfect king that ruled with the assistance of a divine mentor. And that's pretty much how every single king of Rome is remembered until you get to the end of the line with the Tarquinian kings. Though it is worth noting that other sources claim Romulus was born in 773 BCE, and that the twins' grandfather was King Numidus, not their father, which is confusing. And yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. It is just that we've been getting a lot of feedback lately that people are intimidated by how long our videos are. But trust me, you can do it. I believe in you. You should watch more of our videos. Here's another one that I think you might like. Thanks for watching. See you next time. I know, but basically there are a lot of different versions of these stories, and no one knows which one is true, if any. So they flipped a coin and Romulus won, and Remus was like, "Ha ha! Your walls will never reach the top of that hill," which pissed Romulus off so much that he pulled out his sword and stabbed his brother to death. Like he literally erased his brother's contribution to the city, even though it was his brother's idea to move the capital in the first place. And I know this sounds kinda dark for a history lesson, but this channel isn't exactly known for its sunshine and rainbows, you know. But hey, at least he felt bad afterwards and named the city Rome after himself. Not kidding. You know, you can't even tell Remus did anything for Rome. But anyway, that's why he's never mentioned again. I mean, he is in this video, we even gave him a voice and everything. But normally if you ask any ancient Roman about the legendary founder of Rome, they'll tell you it was Romulus, and that's it. She had them live in a cave beneath the Palatine Hill, which, full disclosure, is actually the name of one of Rome's 7 hills. Not the name of an actual hill in the Palatine like a thingy put in a salad. First, he reached out to other Italian city-states and recruited outcasts and slaves to come live in Rome, promising them freedom. This helped establish Rome as a refuge for people fleeing oppressive regimes, a reputation that would make Rome extremely popular in the centuries to come. Second, he reorganized the army, which under his leadership defeated the nearby city of Veii, expanding Rome's territory and establishing it as a regional power. And third, he laid out the city's basic structure, organizing its government and establishing the Senate, which was originally just a council of elders to advise the king, but later became a powerful institution in its own right. Basically, Romulus set Rome up for success. You know, like if this guy dies or whatever. Now, this was great for Rome. The twins, whose names were Romulus and Remus, were hot, young, and ambitious. And they did a lot of good for the city, mostly because they were super into killing people. Like Romulus even allegedly killed a giant from the nearby city of Alba Longa and brought the giant's oxen back to Rome, which is actually how we got our calendar, because each of those oxen represented 1 month. Though that may or may not be true. The point is, they were doing so many cool things, but it wasn't enough for them because they disagreed about where to move the capital, and her unborn children down a well, and she survived. And there are rumors that 2 men are next in line, but they aren't princes, taking the throne for themselves. They are twins bastards, the sons of the most recent Tarquinian, and a woman who was no one really, just a senator's daughter. Curinia, who he slept with once and then forgot about until she showed up at his palace, pregnant with not one but 2 boys. Now, according to the legends, when the king told her to get lost, she refused, so he threw her. But anyway, when the boys were big enough, they learned that they were actually half human, went back to the city to find their dad and promptly murdered him. Go ahead and subscribe, then watch this video about the Tarquinian kings, starting with the first king, Tarquinius. Now, Romulus was the founder and the king of Rome. At least that's what history tells us. However, there's a problem with that. You see, when Romulus founded Rome, he and his men had an issue. They had lots of men, but no women. That can be a problem if you plan on growing your people. So, King Romulus decided that he needed to get some women. But what we do know is that somewhere in the middle of the battle, the captured women ran onto the field. They put down their weapons and sat down to talk. And that's when Romulus made a treaty with the Sabine kings. History tells us that he ruled for many years, at least 40, maybe even 45. And he gave them important roles in the government, teaching them how to make laws and govern the people. He also cared deeply for the people. He was known as a strong and silent type, someone who led by example and inspired others to follow his lead, and that he often took them along with him on his campaigns, letting them learn firsthand what it meant to be a Roman soldier. He taught them discipline, courage, loyalty, sacrifice, obedience, and respect, and they loved him for it. For instance, he was a great teacher, spending hours upon hours showing the younger generation how to fight and to rule. You see, according to legend, Romulus ruled over Rome for many years until one day he walked out onto the field of Mars to inspect some new fortifications. He also appointed many of his close friends and relatives to important positions throughout the city, giving his sister the great Rhea Silvia. And some historians say that when Augustus became emperor, he even took the title of Romulus, trying to connect himself to the legendary king. Most of what we know comes from Greek writers, but that's still not enough to understand him completely. A friend to the poor, a guide for the young, a father to the fatherless, and a husband to the widowed. And that's pretty cool. Others say that the senators did him in, since he was a strong and silent type, and they wanted someone more like them in charge. But the truth is, no one knows exactly what happened to Romulus that day. The city grew bigger and wealthier and more powerful than anyone could have imagined, and it lasted for over 1,000 years. So, thanks to the teachings of Romulus, Rome became one of the greatest empires in history. Lightning cracked, and thunder roared, and heavy rain poured down. Wind howled, trees fell, and people ran for cover. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, Romulus vanished. You see, soon after he disappeared, the people began to notice certain things happening around them. Crops grew better, the weather was kinder, animals gave more milk, and the people of Rome lived better lives. And they believed that Romulus, the god of the people, was watching over them, protecting them, and helping them. So, they built temples in his honor and made sacrifices to him every year. And they continued to do this for centuries. One minute he was there inspecting the fortifications, and the next he was gone. The role of priestess of the god Mars, and making his mother the beautiful Ilia Queen, mother of Rome. And he did these things because he wanted the best for the city, because he was a good leader, a brave warrior, and a fair ruler. And during that time, he led his people into many battles, defeating the Latins, the Alborn kings, and in fact, the Romans wouldn't be where they are today without him. He established the foundations of Roman society, including its government. The Sabines would keep their freedom, but they would also become allies of Rome. The captured women could stay in Rome and marry the men they had taken. And from that day forward, the Sabines and the Romans would be friends forever. They threw themselves between the two armies and begged for peace. There were more men, more women, more ideas, and together they created something special here in the city by the Tiber River. But who was Romulus? What kind of man was he? What kind of king was he? They reminded the men that they were husbands and brothers and friends. They didn't want war. They wanted peace. See, Romulus wanted to stay right there on the Palatine Hill. See, those women were not available. So, Romulus came up with a plan. So, they joined in and drank and sang and danced, and soon everyone was having a great time. Then, after a while, Romulus went up to the leaders of the other tribes and said, "Hey, you guys seem like cool people. How about we cement our friendship with a marriage alliance? We have a lot of eligible bachelors here, so why do you let your women stay here in Rome and marry one of our men?" The leaders agreed, Thinking it was a great idea, he sent messengers to all the nearby tribes inviting them to a grand festival here in Rome. All the young men were excited. They prepared great foods and fine drinks and beautiful music and dancing girls. It was going to be one heck of a party. And now that he was the only surviving prince of Alba Longa, he became the first king of Rome around 753 BCE. That said, Romulus' rule was definitely a pivotal moment in Rome's history, because he established several institutions that would help shape the character of the city for centuries to come. The men of the neighboring tribes were furious. They marched on Rome, demanding their women back. Romulus met them on the battlefield and war ensued. He created a government that embraced diversity, built a strong military and attracted some of the best talent in the region, even though he may have done that last one accidentally by murdering all the rivals of the ruling dynasty. Now, luckily, his son, Numa Pompilius, was more than qualified to take the throne. So, here's what we want you to do. Once upon a time, there was a young man named Romulus. Now, fortunately for him, there were plenty of women nearby in the neighboring tribes, but getting them would not be easy. Then, the men of the neighboring tribes showed up and they were impressed. They had never seen anything like this before. But then, something funny happened. While the men were drinking and partying, Romulus's men snuck up on the women and took them captive. Now, it's hard to say who would have won, the Romans or the Sabines, because history is silent on the matter. And eventually, the men listened. So, thanks to the treaty, Rome had grown even stronger. Well, as it turns out, Romulus was quite the leader. For example, historians tell us that he shaped the Senate, choosing 100 of the bravest and most noble warriors to serve in it. He kept taxes low, made sure the courts were fair, and always put the good of Rome above his own personal gain. Historians tell us that he loved to train the young warriors, showing them how to use all kinds of weapons and how to fight in groups. So, in short, Romulus was a great king, someone the Romans loved and admired, and they admired him even more for his mysterious disappearance. Now, that same day, a storm rolled in. Some say that the gods took him that day, since he had done everything he could for Rome, and it was time for him to move on. However, the Romans believed that he became a god. In fact, the Romans believed that Romulus ruled alongside the other gods, that he sat on Mount Olympus, drinking wine and eating ambrosia. Now, sadly, we don't know much about the god Romulus, because the Romans didn't write much about him. What we do know is that the Romans believed he was Quirinus, a god of the people, a protector of Rome, a teacher of the Romans. In the end, Rome flourished under Quirinus's guidance. And that's the story of Romulus, the first king of Rome.